Welcome back to episode 13 of the ENSPIRES podcast. I'm your friend and your host, Jess M. Cutler. So last episode, we talked about why you should pursue a calling even when you already have a career. A question that I have asked myself many times when my event planning business seemed to demand all of my time, all my attention, and all my willpower, and I just couldn't seem to find the time to work on any of these other endeavors that I felt called to do. Now, not that I think that I needed to stop planning events altogether. I could just feel that I was being called to something greater within and beyond the business. So I know when I left you back a year and a half ago at the end of season 1, I was exploring and experimenting to find my one thing, which I hypothesized could just be like inspiring people, which, I really haven't landed on that yet. But in the meantime, I started a few other endeavors, as I have liked to call them. Obviously, I have Invents, which is the event planning business. And then I have Informs, which this is an event planning training resource where I'm building online courses and I'm offering event-specific coaching and mentoring and consulting to help grow your event planning profession or just a passion, whatever it is. And then there's ENSPIRES, which is the home of this podcast and where I'm offering Christian business and life coaching, which is not event industry specific. I could also do the speaking and the leadership training through my Maxwell certification. That all sort of lives on Inspire. So if you've ever seen any of the logos for these companies, the N is very prominent and it's become a visual reminder of what we're going to be spending some time on today, which is boundaries. And I know you're like, Jess, I thought that we were talking about gifts here. Why do I need to backtrack and how you healed your bitter heart? Why boundaries? Because what I am learning about pursuing my purpose and shifting my career to my calling, and most importantly, stopping that spiral that success and struggles can bring, it actually all boils down to one thing: building boundaries. And it's like the Boundaries book title says, it's learning when to say yes and how to say no to take control of your life. Now, I know I said I wanted to answer a question for you this week that, again, I have tossed and turmoiled about, especially in the midst of all the chaos that the event season brings. And that question is coming after a year and a half after working on my boundaries. And that question is, do boundaries actually make it better? So to really answer this question, I've got to take us back to the end of season 1 of this podcast. So December 2021, coming into early 2022. And last week, I told you about the events that were leading up to the start of the podcast. But this week, I want to start filling in the holes of what happened during my hiatus. See, I was all fired up to go. I was ready to do all the things. And at that time, I was actually more excited about Inspires and Informs than I was anything else. Well, and Crosswinds. Crosswinds is this our really awesome band, and it's just country rock cover band, party band. If you need entertainment, just reach out. We'll be there. It's my other little passion project. But if you remember in the episode where I interviewed Erin Harrigan, I actually hired her on as my business coach because I was ready to move forward with anything but events. And since starting my new endeavors meant inviting strive and overachievement back into my life, I wanted to have someone to lead me through it so I didn't become consumed and controlled by that chaos. She actually wrote a book called Pursuing Success God's Way, and I felt like that platform alone spoke to the place that I was, because for too long, I had been striving for success my way and the world's way, trying to live up to what other people would deem as successful and meet the world's standards of success. So I knew I needed help. And when we started, I actually told her that I didn't want us to work in Invents. I wanted us to work in Inspires and Informs. And, when she didn't know any better, she was like, okay, no problem. I'm your coach. You tell me. But it didn't take her very long in our coaching conversations to be like, hi, I'm your coach and I need to tell you, as much as you want to work on these new business babies, we've got to talk about the six-figure teenage business sitting over here ready to ramp up for COVID collaboration. Like either you've got to give it up or you've got to grow it up and you got to get it rolling without you so that you can have time to work on these other endeavors, which of course made total sense. But I also did not want to hear, because again, I was still reeling from that last week of events we talked about. I was so fired up to pursue my calling and leave my career far behind. But I didn't hire on a coach to not listen to her. So I begrudgingly started working back through the event business. Now, from reading the Boundaries book by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend, before anything had really started back, I had decided I was going to put a few things in place to help me with my boundaries. And we actually talked about a few of them in episode 5. But just to kind of recap it here. One was a letter of engagement, which has been a game changer in my event business. It's really been helping me kind of weed out what I like to call the looky-loos, or the people that basically want me to do all of the work for free. But it's also helped clients understand that building an event takes time. Instead of me trying to work in their like, can you have it to me tomorrow timelines, it allowed me to kind of set that expectation that here's the time that I require. This is how the process works. And if you're not interested in working with me in the way that I know that I can give you my best work, then we may not just be the best fit. And that's okay. So I called my LOE, my letter of engagement, a professional promise, because it's not a contract. It's not a letter of intent. I can do the work that the LOE covers, but if they decide they want to walk at any time, they can. And it allows me to do the same to some regard. Like if they think I can put out a proposal 6 months before an event, and then they think they're going to be able to contract it like 3 days before the event, like, no, I can't do that. But it covers all the work pre-contract, which I really like. I say that it lays out what I promise to deliver to them and then what I expect in return in the planning partnership. So I'm telling you, game changer in the business. And I wouldn't say that it's industry-wide standard yet. And I've lost a few clients that didn't want to pay the minimal design fee, which credits to their event if they do decide to move forward. But I've been in business long enough to know that those are the same clients that make me do like 10 different revisions. They get everything just the way they want it, and then they magically don't want to work together anymore. And then they still end up having the same event that looks a lot like what I designed for them. And they didn't have to pay a dime for me to do it, y'all. Those days for me are over. Another boundary that I had put in place was a time budget. And, I realized that if my time was what I was selling, it was in essence my inventory. I needed to take inventory of my assets, and I really needed to understand how long certain tasks took me. And I started assigning the work into my days, like budgeting that time per program. This, again, game changer. So now when people were asking if I could do a proposal for them, I was looking at my time budget, my inventory, and not only being able to see if I had the time to do it, but when I could start, and more realistically, like when I could actually have it finished for them. I was taking control of my calendar. I was filling it in based on my season and my commitments instead of letting others just fill it in based on their needs. Game changer. Oh my gosh, if I showed you my calendar, and it actually did post it on my social media like this past week, but it was on my What Inspires Me Wednesday. But some people would feel completely overwhelmed by it. But if I have any like type A, color-coded overachievers listening, like you would probably call it what I call planner porn. I love it. It's beautiful to me. I enjoy changing the things up every single week and letting it walk me through my day. And I really get to assess like my travel times and like, I just love it. But really the thing that I love the most is it gives me confidence to assess my best yes in regards to my highest priority. So, what I mean by that is if someone says, hey, Jessica, can I have a meeting at 2:00 on Tuesday? I'll go to my calendar and I'll be like, okay, what do I have 2:00 on Tuesday? And I will have budgeted like client proposal, and I know which one I'm going to work on. And I'm like, okay, Jessica, well, you know how long this proposal is going to take you. If you give up 2 hours on Tuesday, you're going to have to sacrifice that and make that up somewhere else. And so I can judge, or if someone says like, hey, I need you to have this to me by tomorrow, and I know it's going to take me 5 hours. And in the evening, I've got a dinner or a dinner date with my husband, and I know that those 5 hours would have to fall in that same time, then it's like, okay, well, then do I say no to my husband? So that's what I mean. I can really assess like my highest priority. So anyways, I love it so much. It's a part of my company training. So whenever you start in the business, some people really latch on to it. Some not so much. It's fine. But I would say that most all of them enjoy being able to see and learn how I spin my soul. And I put that in air quotes. You can't see it if you're listening. But that's a quote from The Best Yes by Lisa Turkhurst. And she says it, and I love it. It says, "The decisions we make dictate the schedules we keep. The schedules we keep determine the lives we live, and the lives we live determine how we spend our souls." Whew, it's good stuff. Okay, and then 3, the last thing that I did coming back into the business to set some boundaries was I tried to put a backup plan in place for any of the business that I knew I would have to say no to, which I knew, starting off, it was going to be quite a bit. So I tried to help another person build an event planning business based off of my inability to say no. And while my other boundaries were game changers, this one did not work out. The lesson I learned here kind of fell under what the Boundaries book called the law of power. You only have the power to change yourself. You cannot change another person. You must see yourself, not the other person, as the problem. My sister-in-law actually calls this can't listen, gotta feel mistakes. I read the words in the book. I understood it in theory, but I still thought that maybe God had actually given me the power to control others, especially if I thought I was really doing something right by them. But don't worry, he still has not given me that power. So I just had to come to terms with, if I had to say no, then there was no backup plan. It was just no. That was a hard lesson to learn. It was kind of like my backdoor way of avoiding having to actually set boundaries. And then the majority of my coaching call conversations when we first started were really just about this business lesson. But this failure taught me a lot about being a business owner. And it taught me a lot about just me, myself. So instead of trying to play to my weaknesses, I decided to play to my strength. And I decided to really slowly start building a team, which was hard. Because coming out of COVID and having $0 in the bank, it made investment decisions really difficult. But I decided I really needed to bring in an operations person, and that person would really help me handle the groups that I myself was 100% committed to planning, and that was a game changer. So all of this happened, all those boundaries that I set to come back into business, all of it happened before event season started. So by mid-March, it was really just the beginning of the year. So much had already changed in the business, and it really felt different. About that same time, mid-March is whenever I got my Maxwell leadership certification. And so by April, I was ready to take on the world. And then event season hit. Like a tornado. One moment it was fine, and then the next minute it was like this funnel cloud formed and started tearing apart all of my nicely laid plans and boundaries. I wish I could help non-event planners understand what event season is like, but there's really just no way. Take your busiest week, at work, tack on another 40 hours, add on the stress of planning your wedding, or if you didn't plan your own wedding, just an event that was stressful in your life, and then multiply it by 4 months. That's event season. In the off season, we still have to be on site here and there. And typically that's where we do a lot of our travel programs during that off season months, but we spend most of our time planning and designing and basically getting ready for these 4 months. And then during these 4 months, we still have those events to plan that are in the off season, but now we're spending 16 hours a day consecutive on site, troubleshooting and replanning everything that took us those previous months to plan. So it's just this tornado. Everything is just all coming together at once. But I'm not gonna lie, I love the challenge. This is the kind of stress that I thrive in. So I feel for most people, this is the element that makes this kind of job not appealing. But for the select crazy few of us, this is like the part we love. I always say, like, I am an operations girl at heart. Like, I love solving the problems and the riddles that on-siting an event can bring. And this is when we really get to show off our skills or die trying. So I sound like I'm complaining, but I'm not, because I love it. It's like my favorite part. But we were like zooming through the year. Things were going good. I was stumbling my way through enforcing my own letter of engagement, keeping up with my time budget, training Jess, my event service manager at the time. She was rocking. She's still rocking. And I was trying really hard to work from a place of peace and not for a place of peace. And then somewhere in June, like, I just started to lose it. And I don't really even know what happened, but I got on a call with my coach and I was like, look, like, I'm overwhelmed. I've lost my peace, possibly my sanity. My biggest fear is becoming a reality, and I'm falling right back into the same routine that put me in this mess the last time. And she did what she does best. She started asking me questions to sort out what was happening. So, we looked through my to-do list. We looked through my time budget calendar. We talked through the groups that I had committed to serving and the additional leads on the docket. And then she stopped and she was like, whoa, Jess, you did it. Congratulations. You have booked up your entire year of events. Like, the rest is easy from this point. All you have to do, say no to anything else or anything new that comes up for the rest of the year, deliver excellence to the ones you've committed to, and then let the rest figure itself out. Sounds simple, right? I think my entire body went into a sheer panic. Like, this might be good news if this were like November or December, but because it would be because the year was over and like corporate's not really super active like in these months, just with all the other personal commitments going on over the holidays. But y'all, this was June. We were in early June and I was having to face the fact that all my resources were spent. And that's why I was starting to lose it, because I was giving away parts of my soul and my schedule that I didn't have to give. And now this big game that I'd been talking about, having boundaries, was getting ready to be tested. Say no. 2 simple little letters. But the heaviest and hardest words I think I've ever learned in the hospitality industry. Like, I had said a few no's to some groups that were going to fall around some of our larger programs and logistically just didn't make sense. But to say no to a request, even before I assessed whether or not it was a good piece of business, I literally couldn't even wrap my head around that. And my coach could tell. So her moment of celebration, it ended abruptly when my sheer panic took over. And she was like, whoa, what is happening? And I just started rolling through it. But we're only halfway through the year. I still got like a good 3 months of accepting leads before the holidays. Like, think about how much money I'm going to have to say no to without even assessing whether or not it's a good fit for us. Think of the hotel partners that I'm going to let down if I can't help them service their groups. Think of the clients, some repeat that I haven't even reached out to that I'm going to have to say no to. And I've done their events for like 8 or 9 years now. Like, what about everyone else? How many people am I going to have to let down if I just start saying no? See, my inability to say no comes from a fear of hurting others. This is what goes on inside my head. This is what that fear sounds like. But remember, when you're operating out of fear, you cannot operate out of love, because these two emotions can exist together. It says in 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but love drives out fear because fear involves punishment. The one who fears is not perfected in love. And she goes, okay, well, let's walk through it again. Maybe we missed something. Let's just go through it again. So she starts going through it. So July and August are complete blackout months. Like, you are completely committed and you cannot take on anything else. Yes. Okay. So the last group you accepted is for October of this year, and you asked them to give you until mid-August to get them a proposal because you have already committed your time to other groups that were previously booked. So while your September may be an open month, if these groups have to wait until August to get a design, how long would September groups have to wait? Like, would you just send it a week before their event? Well, no. Okay, good point. Plus, the month of September, you'll need to spend getting ready for all the events you have committed to and stacked on top of each other in October. So unless you've got groups in November that are willing to basically wait until right before their events, then you really can't accept any groups for those months. True. And then you've already accepted a large travel program for January, February that is also still waiting for their proposal, which is probably what you'll spend most of November and December planning on top of the holidays if you even want to enjoy them. Yeah. And then she ended it with, well, maybe I've just missed it. What part of the rest of the year do you feel like you have some holes you need to fill? And there it was. I mean, plain as day, black and white, right in front of my face. I was fully committed for the rest of the year. Even staring truth in the face didn't make it any easier. Let's be honest. I could not handle the truth. But when I committed to setting boundaries in my business, I memorized the 3 areas that you were supposed to say no to ensure that I was giving service out of love and I was holding myself together. That's another quote from The Best Yes. Boundaries aren't meant to push others away. They're meant to hold me together. So just as a reminder, these were the 3 areas. 1, no to the unimportant. Last year and every year moving forward was all about priorities. Since I have failed so miserably at this in the past, this was the forefront of every decision. I forced myself to analyze the cost of yes, to understand that every time I said yes in the business, what in my life was I saying no to? If I was so worried about my clients and hotel partners and vendors, was I willing to sacrifice my marriage, my health, my home to make them happy? The answer was no. When I felt like I lost everything during COVID, like who were the ones that were there for me during that time? I mean, the ones that were not my top priority. And I had to keep reminding myself that. And I kept saying, if everything's important, nothing's important. 2, no to the inclination to do less than my best. In the past, when I would just keep taking groups, never assessing whether or not I had the time or resources to handle or the love in my heart to give, I started handing out pieces of my whatever I could find, and then usually ended up being like my health, my family, my friendships, or my happiness. So to do my best work, my most incredible work, I had to ensure that no one was receiving service out of guilt or the fear that I was hurting their feelings or that they wouldn't want to work with me if I said no. Instead, I had to ensure that every group that I said yes to was done out of a place of love and a desire to do good for others. P.S. I did not nail this. I definitely said yes to at least 3 groups that I should not have, and it was evident in the additional stress and pressure that they put on me during the season when I knew I should have said no, but the guilt weighed in too heavy and I caved. Y'all, I don't know what to say. I'm still a work in progress. But 3, lastly, my 3rd no was sometimes to the good. And this one was hard. Like this one is the hardest because I had some really good opportunities that came up after I decided I physically and mentally could not take on any more groups. And it hurt. It hurt my feelings to say no to so many thousands of dollars. One of them was like my favorite group. Like it would have been 9 years working together, minus COVID years, of course. But they called 3 weeks before their program. The team was already committed to 2 very large programs. In fact, our largest programs that they had to operate. I was committed to 3 different proposals due out within the month, with one event being out of town. And as much as I wanted to take it, I had to stand by my decision to say no. And y'all, well, that was hard. And not only that, I did not like it at all. But you know what I did like? I liked being able to sleep at night and have family time and date nights and not overexert all my resources and hate myself and everyone around me. Yeah, I mean, that group may have been good, but having a life and not losing myself, that felt great. And don't get me wrong, this event season was, when I say fully committed, I mean, we were fully committed. I even put my tippy toes right on the edge of the mountain a few times and just peeked over just to see how long the fall might be if I decided I wanted to jump. I mean, I will say I did decide it was time to continue to build the team, but the thought of adding someone to train in the middle of the season was too much. There was no way that I was going to be able to handle that with everything that I'd already said yes to. So I'm not going to lie, it got to the point in July where basically if friends were like, oh my gosh, we need to get together. I'd be like, I would love to get together. Can you call me in September? I mean, that's just where I got. So let's not say that I nailed boundaries by any means, but it was better. So much better. I mean, I didn't do everything by the boundaries. I said a few yeses that should have been nos. I made a lot of mistakes, a few larger failures that taught me some really hard lessons. But y'all, it was better. Better than I have ever experienced in my entire career life. I mean, really any perceived failures on my part were just accepted as opportunities to learn from. And I mean, I'm already excited for this year as I'm trying to be more better and things are going well just from all the lessons I learned last year. But that's what failure is about anyway, right? I mean, John Maxwell says it. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And I have been learning a lot. And unlike in the past, whenever I said I never failed, AKA I failed miserably, but I never let anyone see me cry, I was actually grateful for my failures because what I learned was invaluable to my growth. And just to really put it in perspective for any of my business peeps out there, when I ran the numbers at the end of the year, we did 50% less groups than we typically did pre-COVID and 25% more revenue than we have ever done in the history of events. God wants us to honor what's most important and have strong boundaries in place that allow you to walk in obedience to what He's called you to do. And when you seek Him first, He will bless you beyond measure. And I was blessed beyond measure just by walking in obedience and just learning to say no, even when it didn't feel good to do so because all of my internal guilt and fears. And even though through everything that I have learned, I consider my first year back in business a big old win for events. And over the course of these podcasts, we'll definitely deep dive into more of the lessons that I've learned, but your girl is back. She's back in business with a renewed heart of service and a desire to be the best corporate event planning business in town. And let's just speak it into the universe, in the nation. So that's events. Boundaries and events, making things better, check. Another year later. So I know you're just sitting on the edge of your seat though and wondering, well, how are the rest of your endeavors going? Well, that is a great question. And it's a great follow-up podcast episode when I've got a lot more time to really explain my excuses. No, I'm just kidding. No excuses to explain, just lessons to learn from. So stay tuned in the next coming weeks for more encouraging messages from my personal portfolio of successes and failures as I hope to put courage in you to do the hard things, win, lose, learn, but most of all, grow.